Whispers beneath the winter trees. In the quiet reaches of the world, beyond the last lantern-lit village and past the whispering frost fields, the trees grew tall and silver-veined. There, among gently swaying pine boughs and snow-covered stones, nestled a small hut, smoke curling lazily from its crooked chimney. This was Ember Hollow, and within its humble wooden walls lived 3 souls bound not by blood alone, but by a quiet, unshakable kind of love. Selvara, the mother, moved like moonlight, graceful, slow, and tender. Her long silver hair shimmered even in the dim candlelight, and her curved horns, wrapped in delicate charms, softly chimed with her steps. She spoke in low, soothing tones, her voice often the last sound to linger before the world slipped into sleep. Kaylin, her daughter of 16 winters, was all contrast, sharp-witted, curious, and dressed in shades of black that defied the snow. Yet for all her fire and youthful defiance, she softened when her mother brushed her hair or when her father made her cocoa just the way she liked, extra cinnamon, never too sweet. And then there was Arinder, the quiet soul. A man of soft words and softer hands, his white hoodie sleeves always swallowed his palms. He fixed broken things without complaint, and he carried warmth the way trees carried snow effortlessly. Each morning, Ember Hollow awoke not to alarms or clocks, but to gentle rituals, the crackle of a fire being lit, the soft clink of a teacup being set down, and the faint sound of Kaylin's voice grumbling half awake from her loft. Selvara would hum lullabies from the old days, melodies that smelled like warm bread and tasted like childhood memories. Sometimes she would tell stories that floated like mist above the hearth, painting scenes in the dancing firelight. Kaylin often pretended not to listen, but her ears, like her heart, were always open. One morning, the sky wore a blanket of white, and not a single crow dared to interrupt the peace. Selvara was in the garden, brushing snow from the sleeping herbs, her fingers dancing with tiny wisps of protective magic. Arinder was in the shed, repairing the hinge on Kaylin's window. It squeaked just enough to keep her awake at night, and he couldn't have that. Kaylin herself was on the roof, lying on her back, arms crossed behind her head, staring into the colorless sky. "Do you think it ever ends?" she asked, her breath rising like a spirit. "What ends?" her mother called up, not looking. "This. All this. The snow. The quiet. Us." Selvara looked up then, and for a moment, her eyes held something ancient and knowing. The snow falls, melts, and falls again. The quiet lingers, then fades and returns. But us, we don't end. We change. We grow. But we don't end. Kaylin didn't answer, but she stayed on the roof until the cold kissed her cheeks too sharply, and then she slipped down into her mother's waiting arms. That evening, as the wind began to sing its cold lullaby, Arinder lit the lanterns. They weren't needed, the fire already glowed, but he lit them anyway. It was a habit, a quiet offering to the dusk. Selvara stirred soup in the pot, adding time with a flick of her wrist and a smile. Kaylin, barefoot and curled on the old couch, watched with lazy affection. "Remember the first winter we spent here?" Arinder asked suddenly, his voice low and nostalgic. Selvara chuckled. The roof leaked. The walls creaked. Kaylin cried because the wind sounded like a ghost. "I did not cry," Kaylin mumbled. "I was just emotionally surprised." Selvara leaned over and kissed the top of her head. "Of course, darling." Arinder poured tea into chipped mugs. "Now look at us. We have a roof that mostly holds, walls that barely creak, and a daughter who no longer cries at ghosts." Kaylin rolled her eyes. "I said I didn't cry." Outside, snow began to fall again. Days passed, gentle and uneventful, the way peace often is. There were no great battles, no world-ending storms. Just small moments. Salvara sewing a patch onto Kalen's sleeve while humming. Arinder carving little animals out of spare wood to leave on Kalen's shelf. Kalen writing poems in the margins of old spellbooks, never letting anyone read them. One night, the family sat outside the hut, bundled in blankets, watching the stars. "Do you ever miss it?" Kalen asked. "Miss what?" Salvara asked, brushing a snowflake from her horn. "The noise, the cities, the world." Salvara looked at Arinder, who gave a soft nod. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but the world will always be there. This quiet, this stillness, it's a gift. One day, you'll understand." Kalen leaned against her mother's side. "Maybe I already do." One winter evening, a stranger came to the hollow. Lost and shivering, they stumbled into the clearing just as the light began to fade. Without hesitation, Arinder opened the door. Salvara lit the hearth. Kalen, grumbling, fetched the extra blankets. The strangers stayed one night, then two. By the third morning, they had tears in their eyes as they stood by the fire. "You've built something rare," they whispered. "Something gentle." Salvara smiled. "Gentleness isn't rare. Just quiet. Most people talk too loudly to hear it." The stranger left that day, leaving behind nothing but a carved wooden fox and a note that read, "Thank you for reminding me." Years later, when Kalen would leave Ember Hollow to see the world, she'd carry the softness with her. The calm, the warmth, the way her father stirred tea with slow hands, the way her mother kissed her forehead every night without fail. And when she returned, as she always did, she would find the snow waiting, the fire crackling, and two familiar voices calling her home. Because in the heart of the winter woods, where the snow fell without end and the trees never spoke too loudly, there was a hut. And in that hut, love lived. Not loudly. Not with fireworks or fanfare. Just quietly like snowfall. Forever. Years spun into decades at Ember Hollow, each winter painting the landscape anew, and each spring whispering promises of renewal. The rhythm of their lives remained a quiet symphony, the crackling fire, the soft murmur of voices, the comfortable silences that spoke volumes. Kalen grew, the sharp edges of her youthful defiance softening into a thoughtful curiosity. The poems in the margins of her spell books multiplied, their ink bleeding into tales of snow-dusted forests and the distant shimmer of unseen cities. Her magic, once a spark of untamed energy, began to coalesce under Salvara's gentle guidance. She learned to coax warmth from the frost, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to weave illusions that danced like moonlight on the snow. Arinder's hands, though bearing the marks of countless repairs and creations, remained as gentle as ever. His carvings became more intricate, each tiny wooden animal possessing a unique charm, a silent story etched into its form. He built Kalen a writing desk by the window, its surface smooth and smelling faintly of pine, and crafted delicate charms for Salvara's horns, each designed to catch the light in a new and enchanting way. Salvara's wisdom deepened like the winter snowpack. Her stories grew richer, filled with ancient lore and the echoes of forgotten magic. She taught Kalen the language of herbs, the secrets held within the roots and leaves, and the delicate balance between the seen and unseen worlds. Her laughter, though infrequent, was like the chime of distant bells, a melody that warmed the heart. The stranger's visit remained a cherished memory, a gentle reminder of the impact of their quiet life. Occasionally, other travelers, drawn by rumor or chance, would stumble upon Ember Hollow. Some sought shelter from the harsh winter, others a moment of respite from a weary journey. Each was welcomed with the same quiet warmth, offered food and rest, and sent on their way with a silent blessing. One particularly long winter, a traveling scholar, his face etched with the lines of countless maps and forgotten texts, sought refuge at Ember Hollow. He spoke of sprawling libraries filled with untold stories, of bustling cities teeming with life and invention, and of ancient ruins whispering secrets of the past. Kaylin listened with rapt attention, her imagination ignited by his tales of a world far beyond the familiar snowdrifts. As spring tentatively touched the land, melting the stubborn snowdrifts and coaxing forth the first brave shoots of green, the scholar prepared to leave. He gifted Kaylin a worn leather-bound journal filled with blank pages. "For your poems, child of the snow," he said, his eyes twinkling. "The world awaits the stories you have yet to write." The scholar's words resonated deeply within Kaylin's heart. The quiet comfort of Ember Hollow, though deeply loved, now felt like a familiar room with a door she yearned to open. The whispers of the world beyond grew louder, more insistent. She spoke of her yearning to her parents one evening as they sat by the crackling fire. The words tumbled out, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Selvara and Arinder listened patiently, their expressions serene. "The world calls to you, little firefly," Selvara said softly, her hand resting gently on Kaylin's. "It is natural to want to see its many faces." Arinder nodded, his gaze warm. "Ember Hollow will always be here, waiting for your return. Like the sturdiest tree in the forest, our roots run deep." And so, as the last of the snow melted and the first wildflowers painted the meadows with color, Kaylin prepared to leave. Selvara packed her a satchel filled with dried herbs and protective charms, her movements imbued with a mother's quiet magic. Arinder carved her a small wooden wolf, its eyes filled with a familiar warmth. The morning of her departure was quiet. There were no grand farewells, no tearful embraces. Just a lingering hug from Selvara, a warm clasp of Arinder's hand, and a silent promise in their eyes. Kaylin stepped out of Ember Hollow and into the awakening world. The air hummed with the unfamiliar sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves. The path ahead, though uncertain, felt full of possibility. Her journey took her through sun-drenched valleys and over windswept mountains. She encountered bustling marketplaces filled with exotic sights and sounds, and quiet villages where ancient traditions held sway. She met scholars who shared their knowledge, travelers who recounted their adventures, and healers who whispered secrets of the earth. She learned to navigate the complexities of the world, to trust her instincts, and to find her own voice amidst the clamor. She wrote in her leather-bound journal, filling its pages with observations, encounters, and the blossoming of her own unique magic. Her poems became spells, her spells songs, her songs a reflection of the world she was discovering and the quiet strength she carried within. Yet, no matter how far she journeyed, a part of her always remained tethered to Ember Hollow. The memory of the crackling fire, the scent of pine and wood smoke, the gentle rhythm of her parents' lives, these were the constants that anchored her spirit. Years passed. Kaylin's hair, once the stark black of winter nights, now held streaks of silver, mirroring her mother's. Her steps, once filled with youthful impatience, now carried a quiet grace. The world had broadened her horizons, but it had also deepened her appreciation for the sanctuary she had left behind. One crisp autumn day, a familiar longing tugged at her heart. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke and pine, a whisper of home carried on the wind. Without a word to her companions, she turned her steps northward, drawn by an invisible thread. The journey back was different. The roads felt familiar, the forests welcoming. As she neared Ember Hollow, the scent of wood smoke grew stronger, the silence of the woods more profound. And then, through the thinning trees, she saw it, the small hut nestled amongst the snow-dusted pines, smoke curling lazily from its crooked chimney. The lanterns glowed warmly in the twilight, casting a soft light on the familiar wooden walls. The door opened before she even reached it. Selvara stood on the threshold, her silver hair shimmering in the lantern light, a gentle smile gracing her lips. Behind her, Arinder's familiar silhouette filled the doorway. There were no grand pronouncements, no tearful reunions. Just a quiet embrace from her mother, a warm clasp of Arinder's hand, and the comforting silence of being home. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The familiar scent of thyme and wood smoke filled the air. Kaylin curled up on the old couch, the worn cushions molding to her form. "Welcome home, little firefly," Selvara murmured, stroking her hair. Arinder placed a chipped mug of warm tea beside her, the steam carrying the comforting aroma of cinnamon. Kaylin smiled, a deep and genuine smile that reached her eyes. "It's good to be home." The years that followed were a tapestry woven with familiar threads and new stories. Kaylin shared tales of her travels, her voice filled with the wonder of the world she had seen. Selvara and Arinder listened, their eyes reflecting a quiet pride. The rhythm of life at Ember Hollow settled back into its familiar cadence, enriched by Kaylin's return. The crackling fire, the soft murmur of voices, the comfortable silences, these were the constants that held them together. Occasionally, travelers still stumbled upon their quiet haven. Kaylin, now bearing the wisdom of her journeys, welcomed them with the same gentle warmth she had received years ago. She understood now that the quiet gentleness of Ember Hollow wasn't a retreat from the world, but a sanctuary within it, a reminder of the enduring power of love and connection. One winter evening, a stranger came to the hollow. Lost and shivering, they stumbled into the clearing just as the light began to fade. Without hesitation, Arinder opened the door. Selvara lit the hearth. Kaylin, grumbling, fetched the extra blankets. The stranger stayed one night, then two. By the third morning, they had tears in their eyes as they stood by the fire. "You've built something rare," they whispered. "Something gentle." Selvara smiled. "Gentleness isn't rare, just quiet. Most people talk too loudly to hear it." The stranger left that day, leaving behind nothing but a carved wooden fox and a note that read, "Thank you for reminding me." Kaylin's